Okay, so today we're going to dive deep into something that might not sound super exciting at first glance,
Yeah, I can already tell where this is going.
but stick with us because we're talking about performance management systems and more specifically how they work in the world of HR.
I'm sensing a butt coming.
But actually, way more interesting than it sounds, promise.
Mm.
We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what these systems are really about, how they impact you, how they can be used well, or maybe not so well.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe by the end, you'll even be thinking, hey, if I were designing this thing,
How would I do it differently?
right. So let's start super basic.
Yeah.
When we say performance management systems, what come to mind?
Probably yearly reviews. You know those sit downs with your boss where they tell you what you're doing right and wrong?
The dreaded performance review. Nail on the head. But we're talking about the bigger picture here. Performance management systems in the context of HR.
Right, right. So it's not just about that one review. It's a whole system designed to, well, manage employee performance. I mean, that's literally what it says on the tin.
Okay, fair enough. But what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it starts with setting clear expectations for employees. Like, what are the goals? What does success look like? So everyone's on the same page.
Makes sense. And then how do you actually measure whether someone is meeting those expectations?
That's where you get into things like key performance indicators or KPIs, basically metrics that help you track progress.
Okay, but the word metrics always makes me a little nervous because it seems like it could get very, well,
Reductive.
yeah, like reducing a whole person's work to just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the big pitfalls of these systems. If
Mm.
they're not designed carefully, they can miss the bigger picture.
Right. Like what if you're in a job where it's hard to quantify your contributions? Like, say you're a writer or a teacher.
Yeah. Or like a social worker. How do you measure the impact they're having on people's lives? It's not always about hitting a certain sales target.
Exactly. And I think that's where things can get really tricky. Because if you're being judged solely on metrics that don't capture the full scope of your work, well, that's not fair, is it?
Not at all. And it can actually be counterproductive because it can discourage people from taking risks, from being creative.
Yeah, because if you're afraid of not hitting those numbers, you're going to stick to the safe, the tried and true.
Exactly. No one's going to try anything new if they're worried about getting dinged on their performance review.
So how do we design performance management systems that actually encourage growth and development, that don't feel like this constant surveillance?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And
Oh,
honestly, there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
right. Every company, every team is different.
Yeah. But I think there are some key principles that can help. Like one thing is to move away from traditional top-down performance reviews.
Okay, so less of the boss decides everything kind of vibe.
Exactly. And more emphasis on regular informal feedback. Like having frequent check-ins with your manager where you can discuss your progress, get guidance.
So it's more of a two-way conversation.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of open communication and feedback where
Mhm.
people feel comfortable sharing their ideas and, asking for help when they need it.
Okay, that makes sense. So less focus on judgment, more focus on development.
Yeah. And also using a variety of methods to assess performance, not just relying on, one single metric.
So kind of like looking at the whole picture,
Mm.
like not just the numbers, but also things like teamwork or problem-solving skills,
Right. And how someone contributes to the overall company culture, things like that.
which I imagine is a lot harder to measure.
It definitely can be. But that's where things like 360-degree feedback can be useful.
Oh, I've heard of that, but remind me how it works.
Basically, you're getting feedback from multiple sources, not just your manager, but also, your peers, maybe people who report to you.
So you get a more well-rounded view.
Exactly. And it can help identify areas for growth that you might not even be aware of.
Makes sense. What else is changing in the world of performance management? I feel like this is a really evolving area.
Oh, for sure. One trend we're seeing is the use of OKRs. That stands for objectives and key results.
Okay, I've definitely heard that term thrown around. What's the deal with OKRs?
So OKRs are basically a framework for setting ambitious, measurable goals and then, tracking progress towards those goals.
Hmm.
They're really good for aligning individual goals with team and company objectives.
So everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction.
Exactly. And it promotes transparency and accountability. Everyone knows what they're working towards, and they can see how their individual efforts contribute to the bigger picture.
Got it. So it sounds like performance management is kind of shifting from this like punitive thing to more of a tool for growth and development.
Yeah, exactly. It's about recognizing that people are a company's most valuable asset, and that investing in their development is key to success.
Well said. I think we covered a lot of ground today. Performance management systems, they can be complex.
That's an understatement.
But the key takeaway, I think, is that they're more than just a bureaucratic process. They're about creating a work environment where people feel, valued, supported, and empowered to do their best.
And that benefits everyone, right? The employee, the team, the company as a whole.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. If you were designing the ideal performance management system, what would it look like? What would it prioritize?
Yeah. What would make it truly effective? Would it be all about metrics? Or maybe more focused on well-being and professional development?
Lots to think about.
Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.
See you then.